Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak this evening. I run a landscape architecture and design practice, Colour. We are driven in many ways by urban design, understanding a little bit more about space and the environment, and particularly environmental performance at present. One of the areas doing a lot of work at this moment in time, which economically is working well with the market, is in the schools programme, building schools for the future. We're probably looking at 30 odd schools around the country at any one time. In particular, how this works to create new learning and teaching environments, because it seems, and the messages that have been coming through from industry, from schools, and just anecdotally, is that the national curriculum isn't necessarily working. Schools aren't necessarily producing the right kind of skills in children, and there's opportunity to do things differently. So we looked at this piece of research going back to nursery school in County Durham, which was titled slightly long-windedly, but it's a smaller concept than the title. It's about essentially interventions in the external environment and how that can shape and affect teaching and learning, both indoors, crucially, as well as in the external environment. Peasers West, a primary school, small pit village in the depths of County Durham, with creative partnerships, and Professor Dillon and Anna Craft of the University of Exeter and Open University. Project started, and the first introduction was in many ways led by an interview by the children. The school's council interviewed me, the 6-year-old, 7-year-old, asking questions of what we could bring to the school. Our first introduction to the school was through a competition that we organised, which was, again, looking to see the world through children's eyes. And this very much sort of came from first steps of working with children at schools, just asking, understanding what they wanted and what they enjoyed, what they didn't like in terms of their external environments. And generally, the pictures that children would come up with would be very different from those perceived by the teachers. So, for instance, there may be a beautiful part of a school ground, which with fantastic views, mature trees, it's this wonderful environment, and children say, "Oh no, we hate that place." And just, why is that? And it turns out there's stinging nettles or thistles, or there's something there. So it's really getting under the skin of what children are about. And the top left image was one of the favourite spaces of one child, because it was somewhere to meet their friends. It was a sunny bank and a wall where they met their friends. The bottom left was probably reinforces any stereotypes of the northeast of England, but the goals were a good size. It's, top right, daisies make me smile, which is a lovely little sort of quotation from the exercise. This little lad won it. Who's 4, and his journey through this competition has really sort of profoundly affected this latter work. I mean, the school when we'd shortlisted him for in the final. So it's great that DJ, his name, is part of this competition, and his work will be exhibited, because he's one of the quiet kids in the year. His family finds it a bit difficult in the village. Same story to when our guys were a year later in the school looking at the research programs. And DJ, how to get a little quiet later. No, he's the guy, he's the celebrity in the playground, and his confidence, his self-esteem had absolutely gone through the roof, which is just fantastic. Just one little story of this approach. So we started off really with the baseline of this small school, understanding what children liked about the place, and with the years 5 and 6 at the beginning, the football field, they liked the courtyard in the centre of the school, and they liked certain places where they would meet. And it was a fairly sort of black and white experience in terms of we like this, we don't like this. Outside we play, inside we learn. The younger children showed a very similar map, but in fact the places that other children liked, they disliked. Football field, didn't like that because they get hit by footballs. Someone had fallen in the pond in the courtyard, so didn't like that. There was a cloakroom where things got lost and it was busy and children got sort of knocked around, so they didn't like that. So essentially what we sought to do at the beginning was gather data, and the model of the study was as such. At baseline, we would, as designers, set up a series of interventions with the intention of just building an articulacy and a familiarity with the external environment. The researchers at each stage would then take their notes and tie it into pedagogy and the research, the terminology that really sort of backed up the work. So we start up with this baseline, establishing how this indoors and how the outdoors were used. Organised a series of interventions with the researchers, with the children, with the teachers all together, with the view of a celebration, at which point there is a design is created, an installation for year groups within the school playgrounds, and ultimately permanent change. The first one of these interventions was a visit to a nursery school. It's one that we'd designed where essentially the brief was every element within the playground didn't dictate to the children how to use that particular playground. So there's no rights or wrongs, it's all a learning experience. One great example was the little path here, which can't quite see, it goes up and down. And it was just enough of a gradient whereby the school had these little two-seater trikes, and one's on the front and one's on the back. And it's just steep enough that one can't pedal the other one, so they have to get off and negotiate, and the school actively promotes conflict within the children, so they learn these negotiating skills. So this was one of the places the teachers had taken to. Children were taken on a walk around the village and finding different elements from different places and had to talk about them afterwards. We arranged, in perhaps one of the coldest days of last year, a programme of designing vegetable beds, and talked about where would the best place to be. You want sun, it's not somewhere that's used at present, isn't in the way of other things. Started off in the classroom designing these beds and took them outside, and these were built on that day and the preceding days. Other exercises included one which was guiding each other around the grounds by a mirror. Another being, and this is where it started to get sort of interesting, as they were building up their familiarity and with the external environment and using some props and elements, whereby we created this idea, gave them a series of props, and they had to survive on a desert island. And it wasn't long before there's someone was fishing, building shelters, and so forth. This little mini societies have developed at each of these groups. This all led up to the point of leading towards a celebration and the creating this special place as a project for each year. And again, we had elements, simple pieces of timber that were some donated bamboo sticks, and it was really up to the children to design their places. They'd been working on this for a term beforehand and had been sort of developing thoughts as to what they wanted out of their particular place. And some of the most popular elements actually have lasted. For instance, the little sort of benches now have remained within the school grounds. Tied into this was the design process, and they looked at creating theatres, developing the courtyard in the garden, and different classes were engaged at different times with different media, and model making was one of them. This all led to the day of celebration, where each of the year groups would bring their projects, share their projects, and some of those were physical elements, installations, others were song, performances, more models, and the whole school came together, parents, sort of governors, sort of teachers, sort of researchers, our team, and it was this fantastic day. We were then keen to take that on so that the school could then have certain elements that they could to work with, and the children could work with. One was a multi-theatre, which was a reaction to the amphitheatres, which are everywhere. But healthy eating tied in with the local healthy eating group, and there was assistance in terms of the vegetable growing process, and that's now a very sort of popular part of the curriculum. And in another area which had been identified as a problem area, the opportunities were identified whereby there could be a magic forest, and so a simple space was created. And a year on, it's really interesting. That space is now timetabled by the pupils for use during playtime, during break time. So there's the children organise their own plays, they have their own performances, they have their own X factor. It's used all the time and strictly timetabled. This without any teachers in sight. This is all children orientated in a very small school in a community which is cut off in many ways from mainstream life in 21st century life and in the northeast. And so the Magic Forest was a tremendous success. In terms of outcomes, I was very wary of PowerPoint slides with loads of words on and loads of lines. I felt perhaps the best way of expressing actually was actually writing down these different points, because there's some phenomenal and some very big things have come out of this exercise, out of this programming. There's been a noticeable shift towards the children actually to taking responsibility for their own learning. So at the start of the process, ask a child of any age and where their favourite place was in the outside and what they did outside. And generally it was, we like playing football on the playground, we like playing football afterwards. 5 months later, asked the same children, he said, well, the bottom of the ground, it's a really nice place to read a book, or it could be good for learning up there. We really enjoy constructing things with the loose pieces of timber which are in the bottom woodland. And that change over a really short period of time, absolutely phenomenal. This whole sort of interaction was very much part of that process. Whereas right at the beginning, where indoors was for teaching, outdoors was for learning. Sorry, outdoors was for learning, indoors for teaching. That was very much turned on its head, and so children would actually see these opportunities, and that played to our advantage in that, and the teachers in that. Anything that happened outdoors wasn't seen as work. It was effectively play. And just as we all stood up when we thought of our most sort of familiar, or most favourites of places as children were outside. So this has really sort of opened up the way that education is delivered at this particular school. When teachers have noticed that listening skills have improved, the children are able to express themselves far better than they think they did beforehand, before this specific exercise. And a great thing, talking about risk taking. I mean, there is that confidence to do things that that they felt came out of this process. There's some wonderful quotes on the Creative Partnerships website, which has the full report for this study, from the children describing their sort of feelings of sort of beyond enjoyment. They're described almost the exhilaration of being able to carry out this kind of project. So the feeling that, well, this doesn't happen at school. The older ones moving on to secondary school thinking, well, we may never get this opportunity, and describing almost this sense of electricity on the days of these interventions. Quite sort of phenomenal a reaction. So in many ways, it is about sort of self-esteem, and through involving the children in the process, tying in with national programs. It's the schools certainly feel that it's helped to raise achievement in boys. Again, a really is a topical issue there through this engagement. And in terms of traditional playground games, there seems to have been a shift towards creative play, where children would just make up their own games, do their own things, as opposed to kicking a ball around or other more sort of traditional things, but sort of specifically probably away from the quite sort of one-dimensional sort of football culture. Really interesting was this finding of leadership, whereby, and again ties in with your words earlier, Tim, whereby the older children were just from off their own bat, mentoring and helping sort of the younger children through, and it's just something they naturally did. So they would take on, and they would have learnt from the teachers, from ourselves, the cultural partnership, the cultural partners, and take sort of the younger children through the different processes in a very very sort of nurturing and sort of whole way for the school. I mean, perhaps this is something that is more appropriate in that particular point. In fact, it is a smaller school, so there's 125 for the whole year, so for the whole school rather than a single year intake. So that sort of crossing over between year groups perhaps was made more easy by that. But certainly a role that the older children were very comfortable with, as well the younger ones. In terms of teaching, the teachers certainly found that they were thinking of just different ways to teach, and within the national curriculum, there's certain things they had to deliver, but there's a completely different way to teach, and the responses that they were getting were very very positive through this, in many ways, through this breaking down of the indoor outdoor perception of play and work. This piece of work was seen as the first year. With the second year, the researchers and teachers were developing a new curriculum for the school. Now that's now sort of feeding on in the head, has subsequently, as part of the early process, fed into QCA and developing a new national curriculum, whereby open-ended and child-orientated learning is very much sort of part of delivering a new national curriculum, which again is perhaps institutionalising what good teachers would have done anyway. It's an interesting quote, and in many ways it is about perception. Getting the most out of external space is about perception. It isn't £30,000, £100,000 worth of play equipment. It's fallen log. Railway sleepers are timeless. They are open-ended. They mean something to everybody. Every year they're new. They have different messages. And the crossover with park design is really exciting. With incidental design in streets, there is an experience of walking around Amsterdam. You see very similar interventions within the streetscape. Ultimately, it's leading towards a sustainable and creative culture of teaching and learning, and tying in with new national curriculum. I think it does provide a very positive opportunity for the future.